Good evening, viewers. Thank you for joining us. This is an English edition of news from Dalsan TV, Somalia's premier television news network, broadcasting to you the latest news from Somalia and around the world in both English and Somali. My name is Yunus Deko, and these are some of our top news headlines. Somali armed forces seize key villages from Al-Shabaab in Middle Shabelle. Somalia hails sanctions imposed by US on Al-Shabaab financiers. And UN chief in Somalia holds talks with Puntland leader, stresses significance of direct local elections. Welcome to this broadcast, an English edition from Dalsan TV. The head of the United Nations mission in Somalia, Ambassador James Wan, has called on the Puntland administration to hold direct elections in the autonomous northern state of Puntland. The UN chief, accompanied by top officials of the African Union and the European Commission, held meetings with state and non-state actors, including members of the civil society, during his visit to Garowe.
The holding of direct local elections was the focus of a visit today by representatives from some of Somalia's main international partners to the country's northern federal member states, FMS, of Puntland. The UN Special Representative for Somalia, James Swan, commended the government and people of Puntland for their continued commitment to deliver direct local elections as enshrined in Puntland's constitution and the importance of the inclusion of all members of society.
We urge that the electoral process advance on the basis of broad consultation, as well as inclusion of women, youth, minorities, and people with disabilities. We hope that Puntland's efforts can also inspire the broader process of one person, one vote elections across Somalia at the federal and the member state levels.
Earlier, the two men and members of the visiting delegation and the FMS leaders cabinet and advisory team had taken part in a roundtable discussion on direct elections with the participation of other stakeholders, including the Transitional Puntland Electoral Commission, TPEC.
We had an opportunity to exchange ideas and to have a fruitful discussion on Puntland's plans to organize direct local elections in the first half of 2023. Several of Somalia's international partners have been providing substantial capacity building and financial support to this effort.
With the elections in Puntland taking place in the context of a drought affecting much of Somalia, the UN official assured the people and leadership of Puntland of continued support from the international community. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or CHA, 7.8 million people have been affected by the drought, with 6.7 million people expected to be acutely food insecure from October to December 2022. Another estimated 6.4 million people lack access to safe water and sanitation, elevating the risk of cholera and measles, especially in camps for internally displaced people.
The government has seized key villages from Al-Shabaab on Wednesday following military operations. The villages and towns were where members of the Al-Qaeda allied militant group controlled before they were removed, and they fall under the administration of Shabelle region. The Somali government has declared operations conducted today in parts of Middle Shabelle region a success. According to the Somali National Army, the government has seized several key villages from Al-Shabaab militants following an offensive operation on Tuesday. The liberated areas are Warkulan, Bagajeh, Galaf, War'ise, Qordere, and Jilable areas between Johar City and Raga'el districts of Middle Shabelle region. Somali National Army soldiers have been conducting operations aimed at flushing out members of the militant group from the area. The liberated villages and towns were strategic for the jihadist group Al-Shabaab, which is fighting to topple the central government of Somalia. Offensives carried out by the locals, assisted by the government to liberate Al-Shabaab-controlled areas, have been fueled by the continuous atrocities by the group on the local civilians. The militant group has been using these towns as its strongholds and has used them for organizing terrorist attacks, either with explosives and suicide bombers on different parts of Somalia. The Somali government has expressed its solidarity with the armed forces who have taken up arms to resist the Al-Qaeda ally in Africa. It has vowed to revamp the fight against Al-Shabaab until they are removed from all areas they now control. Meanwhile, following the announcement by the United States Government Treasury Department imposing financial sanctions on individuals suspected of supporting Al-Shabaab, the Somali government has hailed the decision by the US government. Mogadishu has ordered Somalis not to engage and deal with individuals accused of supporting the group logistically and financially. The federal government of Somalia has welcomed the move by the United States government's Treasury Department to impose sanctions on individuals who provide financial and logistic support for the militant group Al-Shabaab. The Somali government has instructed different sectors of the economy in Somalia to avoid dealing with and cooperating with those listed in the sanctions. The federal government of Somalia said the action taken by the U.S. Treasury was the result of investigations conducted jointly by the two governments. The Treasury Department on Monday unveiled sanctions targeting 4 senior Al-Shabaab leaders as well as 5 operatives, all said to be key players in a network charged with raising money, recruiting fighters and procuring weapons. The Treasury named one of the key leaders as Abdullahi Jerry, Al-Shabaab's chief of weapons procurement. The Treasury said Jerry has been active as recent as last year, often getting weapons from local sellers and international suppliers based out of Yemen. Another sanctioned Al-Shabaab official, Khalif Adale, reportedly answers directly to the terror group's Emir Ahmed Diriye and served as the point of contact for organizations forced to pay off the group. The U.S. Treasury also sanctioned Abdikarim Hussein Gagale, a deputy finance official, and Hassan Afgoye, a key negotiator responsible for overseeing various racketeering efforts. This comes days after the Somali authorities warned businesses in the capital, Mogadishu, against paying taxes to the Al-Qaeda affiliate. Al-Shabaab gets revenue from businesses in Mogadishu, raising tens of millions of dollars for their militant activities in Somalia and in neighboring countries. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has declared an all-out war against Al-Shabaab and sought international support to defeat the militants. Meanwhile, a UN agency is warning that Somalia's worst famine in half a century is fast approaching, and it has called on partners to act quickly. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, it says that many children cannot even reach health facilities due to the insecure conditions that dominate Somalia, pointing out that Somalia will face the death of many children on a scale never seen before if financial support doesn't come as early as required.
Somalia faces famine on a scale last seen half a century ago. The United Nations has said as it set a new target of more than $2 billion in funding needs. In August, 44,000 children were admitted to health establishments with severe acute malnutrition, a condition that means a child is up to 11 times more likely to die from diarrhea and measles. The UNICEF spokesperson James Elder said severely malnourished children are up to 11 times more likely to die of diarrhea and measles than well-nourished children. With rates such as this, Somalia is on the brink of a tragedy at a scale not seen in decades, he added. Somalia has suffered 4 successive failures in its rainy season since the end of 2022, and there are fears that a 5th failure is now underway. An estimated 7.8 million people, roughly half of the population, are now affected by drought, of whom 213,000 are at high risk of famine, according to the UN. According to the UN agency, in 2011, after 3 failed rains, the affected population was half of what it is now, and the overall conditions, rain and harvest, were on the mend. Today, it's been 4 failed rains. The forecast for the 5th rains is looking pretty grim, and the affected population is twice the size of 2011.
Meanwhile, in Tigray, the latest airstrike on Ethiopia's northern Tigray region risks aggravating the devastating impact of hostilities on civilians, the UN humanitarian chief has said. High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk issued a warning yesterday calling on the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Ethiopian government to stop the hostilities. An International Rescue Committee official was killed during one of the airstrike by the Ethiopian government. He has appealed to all partners in the conflict to immediately cease hostilities and work towards a peaceful and lasting solution. The High Commissioner also stressed on the need to support all efforts towards ensuring accountability for gross violation and abuses of international human rights law and international human rights law committed during the conflict.
Artillery strikes in Tigray. Disruptions to communications make it particularly difficult to verify reports, but it is clear that the toll on civilians is utterly staggering. In the midst of a grim humanitarian situation, this is unacceptable.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said on Wednesday he was introducing martial law in 4 of Russia's occupied territories in Ukraine. In televised remarks to members of his Security Council, Putin also instructed the government to set up a special coordinating council under Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin to work with Russia's regions to boost Moscow's war effort in Ukraine. The move, nearly 8 months into the war, marked the latest escalation by Putin to counter strikes against the Ukrainian forces. They came on the same day that Russian installed officials in Kherson, one of the 4 occupied regions, told civilians to leave some areas as soon as possible in anticipating an imminent strike from Ukraine. Putin said the measures he was ordering would increase the stability of the economy, industry and production in support of the regions which have been annexed from Ukraine.
Объединяет большая историческая Россия. К солдатам и офицерам, добровольцам, которые сейчас сражаются на передовой, находятся на боевом посту. К нашим братьям и сестрам, жителям Донецкой и Луганской народных республик.
And with that story, we come to the end of this broadcast, an English edition of news from Dalsan TV, Somalia's premier television news network, with the latest news from Somalia and around the world in both English and Somali. My name is Yunus Deko. On behalf of all of our production team, enjoy the rest of your viewing. Thank you for joining us.